to the Wellbeing Show. I'm your host, Noel McDermott. I've got Adam, who's Tweedledum, and we're just waiting for Tweedledee, Conroy, to join us from a band of brothers. Conroy's currently switching machines on and off frantically in the hope he gets a Wi-Fi signal. So there you go. That's evidence, isn't it, that this is a live show. And we've got these fantastic guys on from Band of Brothers, an amazing organisation that we're going to learn about. That I put up on the pedestal. They're going to shoot me down in flames for putting them on a pedestal, but that's fair enough. I'm still going to do it because I think they're amazing. Anyway, it's a live show. If you're listening to this on a Wednesday, the 23rd, 9 o'clock in the UK, it's going out live. We'll go out live until 10 o'clock. Be lovely to hear from you. You're welcome to drop in messages in the streaming platforms that we're on, which I believe at the moment are Facebook Live and YouTube. And you can sort of leave messages there. James will help scan them, see if there's anything comes up and you send it through. Or you can drop me a message on WhatsApp, +44 7506 319 745. That's +44 7506 319 745. Be lovely to hear from you. Send messages. If you want, you can jump into a call with us and have a chat. So that's enough of me, I think. And Adam Bloomberg, no relationship to the billionaire Bloomberg, I presume.
No, none at all. Thank you very much.
None at all. That's a pity. I was going to sort of ask you for some cash, but forget it. How are you doing, Adam? Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's good to have you. And it's Conroy, your boss, who's going to represent the organisation, is currently going to come on at some point, and James is sort of liaising with him. So in the meantime, we've got you. So don't freak out too much. It's really good to have you here. Tell us in your own words about Band of Brothers, what it is and what you do as an organisation.
Well, yeah, it's a mentoring community. It's an organised community of men mentoring men, is what it is. Yeah.
Why is that useful? I mean, I sort of like.
Why is it useful? It's needed. Who's going to teach men how to be men if men aren't going to do it? And not just teach how to be men. Who's going to share and share the journey along the way?
Yeah,
there's a lot.
It's interesting. There's not a lot, but there's been quite a bit of research around. There used to be rituals to transition boys into manhood, and many cultures there still are, but not in ours.
Yeah.
And so there's a sort of theoretical base that is arguing that lack of those transition rituals are a significant problem. You're nodding away there. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, no, it does. I come from my religious background. Still holds true to initiating their young men. I stepped away from religion from a very young age. It didn't appeal to me.
Is that Jewish background? So
Yeah.
I know some of the 14 certain things happen for young men. Is that right?
Yeah, it's 13, and I thought the Bloomberg would have given it away, but yeah.
I didn't want to make assumptions. I didn't know, but yeah, Bloomberg is definitely a Jewish name. But we're not talking about that because you don't have the billions, so we're not interested. But you've stepped away from religion, but you get that idea that your culture, if you like, that culture that you're part of, still has those rituals and those transitions.
Yeah. And I feel like for men and for women, there's got to be a significant moment when I stop becoming a boy and start becoming a man, and what that actually means to me, and what it means to the rest of the world, and how I'm seen.
Yeah, but I mean, without opening up a can of worms about gender and non-binary, etc., I think there is a difference in the fact that certain types of bodily changes take place for women which are shared, and maybe men don't share those bodily changes as much. So, but certainly, the development of periods and stuff like that. And again, I know it's a hot topic at times, but that does lead to certain formalized responses at a societal level, as opposed to individual cultural levels. So there's a if like you come from a Jewish tradition which has transition, other traditions don't, but all cultures, it doesn't matter, women do these changes and somehow there's something associated with them, either medical interventions or whatever. So I think there is a slight difference in that sense.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So you weren't just sort of somebody who saw a job advert and got a job as a mentor in Band of Brothers. That's not your story, is it? What is your story there?
My story is I came through as a young man who needed to be mentored. I was involved with probation. I made quite a few wrong choices and stuck by them for a while, and I went on a rites of passage weekend with a Band of Brothers, and I did the initial 3-month quest, and it really opened up a whole new world and a way of thinking for me, and it was clear to me that I had a lot more work to do and a lot more. I had to spend a bit more time on myself and right a few wrongs and put action into a few changes in my life so I can start seeing more positive things around me.
Yeah. All right. So for those people that are listening by audio only, Conroy has joined us. You won't see the visual clue, and he's been very respectful about Adam talking and sharing his story. So that seemed like a natural break to me, Adam. I hope that's okay. Just Perfect. To sort of welcome Conroy. Hello, welcome back into the show. Really good to have you back with us.
Yeah, thanks, Noel. And hi, Adam. Thanks for holding the fort. It's had a few technical issues and I'm back. And just hearing your story there just reminds me of meeting you and those rites of passage and where you were there and how far you've come as a person, really, in the work you've done and grown in this organization and grown as a man. So, yeah, it's wonderful to see you. Yeah. And I'm not sure I'd have been happy to share such a Zoom call when I first met you.
We've already agreed that certain things need to stay in Vegas, so that's okay. What happened in Vegas, it really does stay there. Let's just leave it there, right? I mean, there's like for people watching and listening, there's going to be these. I'm going to say this explicitly in this conversation name, because Band of Brothers deals with young men that are in, can be in quite challenging and difficult situations, and that don't just carry emotional baggage, but maybe other sorts of legal baggage. And that's like, we have to be sensitive about this shit, about what's going on. And so at times the conversation, folks, might seem like I'm going, is that all right to talk about? No, it's not. Okay, we won't talk about that. And it might seem a bit odd and a bit stilted, but that's because we have to protect people and look after people. We have to have a safe environment and also a grown-up, realistic understanding of what the actual limitations are and what the actual boundaries are, and not a naive sense in which that the task in this field is to go in and just get people to vomit up everything, because it's not. You're nodding away, Conroy. Why are you nodding at that? Go on,
I'm nodding because I'm really honoured by the way you're talking. They're respecting people's stories, respecting where the boundaries of where they feel they can go and open up, and not wanting just to open people up in their stories and go to those dark places just for entertainment's sake. Because I've seen that, and some programs, some shows can be a bit like that, can be a bit kind of kind of gladiatorial. Let's get it all out there. Let's get people down into their dark places, and let's go for the emotion, and that helps with ratings. And what I'm hearing you say is actually really respectful of where people need to go and where they need to be. Yeah. Having said that, one of the things that I admire about Adam is you talk truth. And if you're happy to say things that are real for you, if the circumstances are that way. So, yeah, you've done a lot of work on yourself. And one of the things with doing work is we have this saying: if you don't tell your story tells you. And being comfortable with kind of that idea of sharing some of the dark things, some of the things that we're not necessarily proud of in our life, but we're beyond that. But actually, they don't define us anymore. I'm not that person. I've moved on from that. But
I'm not a victim to it anymore.
Yes, say that again, Adam.
I'm not a victim to it anymore, to the old
No, you're
stories that
not.
I tell myself. So
You're definitely not. I mean, that's obvious after 2 seconds of talking to you, to be honest.
yeah.
Sort of the way you talk about things. Another thing that strikes me about this, and here I'm going to talk about me, if that's all right. And I'm going to talk about somebody who I can talk about now because they're not alive anymore, and that's my father, who my family buried about a month and a half ago now. And you know, I'm sort of loath to talk about somebody who's actually alive, who was a difficult and challenging person, and because that's unfair. And it's you know, my own personal work has taught me to move into a place of compassion around myself and other people, even if they're dodgy as fuck, which my dad is or was, right? And it's not my job to be judging somebody because he didn't have the breaks I had. He didn't get to train as a therapist, didn't have loads of loving people around him, mostly because of his own life choices. But that's not unusual for a lot of blokes, really, to sort of buy into their victimhood and bury themselves a grave with it, which is essentially what he did. But, you know, I can talk about stuff now, and I can talk about how he was violent, dangerous, horrible, drunk, blah, blah, blah. And he didn't want to do anything about it in the end. But I don't have any bile about it. I don't have any revenge about it. I've taken ownership of myself and worked on transforming. And I was saying to you just before the show, and I don't think you knew this, Conroy, I've got my own boy. And
I didn't know that.
And do you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not going to live that other life that bloke bequeaths me, because this is the life I've got. And I have ownership of this life. And I'm very grateful and feel very blessed with it. And there's that sort of stuff going on as well, I think.
Yeah, similarly, you know, I look back on my early years, and yeah, there was a lot of trauma, there's a lot of difficulty. I had a difficult kind of upbringing, and I was trapped in that victim place, kind of with that idea, even around various other things like the racism I faced, and kind of using that as you know, anger against society for a long time. And again, it's taken me a lot of work to go, you know what, that's all the part of what's made me. And I'm fine with all of that. And yeah, some of it was really difficult. But again, and something else has really helped me over the past few months, and that's learning more about my parents and what they actually had to go through and who they actually really are. I can see why some of those behaviors were there now. It doesn't excuse something, but I get it. And again, just that term you use, I can apply a compassionate lens to how they are. So I'm not excusing things, but it just allows me to accept that's how it was. There was a reason for that. And you know what? I've not turned out to be such a bad geezer after all. But I'm not going to do that. Right. Yeah.
You're all right. I think you're pretty, as they say. So not too bad, not too shabby at all, Mr. Conroy. So you're nodding away there, Adam. That some of those themes sort of resonate with you. Is that?
Yeah, I'm really blessed to still have my father in my life.
Yeah.
He's getting on a bit now though. Yeah, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I definitely blamed the world and other people for a lot of my misfortune, and my dad got the full brunt of that.
Right.
He's definitely not a perfect man or an angel, and he definitely gave me a great opportunity to learn from his mistakes, but he's also a very charismatic man and a very wise and strong man, and there's a lot of good qualities that I can take from him, and I can also bless him for the opportunity to learn from his mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, the turning point for me, I think, in the relationship inside my own head with the man that was my father was getting hold of a concept called forgiveness, which sounds really Jackanory, right? But actually, I went through a formal process.
Sounds very Christian.
It is. It's really weird. It's really weird. But I went through a formal process of trying to figure out how I could rearrange in my head the relationship. I've done loads of personal therapy and all that sort of stuff. And I joined a self-help group, a peer support group for some problems that I was having. And they suggested this process, a formal process of identifying harms, putting to one side, and then trying to identify what was my bit in all of that stuff so that I could rearrange internally the victim perpetrator dynamic. You're nodding away there, Conroy, does that?
Because that's a massive piece for me, especially when working with some of the young men that we work with, this idea of victim perpetrator dynamic, because generally society has labeled them as the perpetrators. And if we peel that back to actually where things started, a lot of the boys we work with, a lot of the men we work with, they've been groomed into that world. They've been victims of something. It didn't start off that way. And again, if we go even before that, they look into their childhoods, the trauma that many of them have suffered in their families. It's like, actually, let's take that and then see why those behaviors then kind of came out the way that they've come out and have gone against society in terms of being the perpetrator. And actually, both those things are at play at the same time. It isn't a clean line that you are just people are just a perpetrator in life and they haven't been a victim to something as well. And it's accepting that and then trying to move beyond that. I'm not just fashioned by the negative actions that I may have done in my kind of past. There is something behind that. There is something behind those behaviors. So
how do you, and I'm going to ask both of you, and I'm thinking here, like I'm thinking clinically, my first job after I qualified was in forensic placements, and forensic placements, that don't know, hospitals where people have committed serious crimes, but because they have a disorder of some sort, they end up in hospital rather than prison system. So I mean, I was working with people who've done some very, very heinous things, and those types of dynamics were very much there, particularly in the context of a hospital trying to provide treatment, right? And I guess there's some resonances there about the conversation that we're having at the moment. Not that necessarily people are on a sentence, as it were, but there's some similarities there about these crossovers between the criminal justice system, the therapeutic system. How are you sort of managing all of that, Conroy, do you think?
Well, for me, it's interesting to hear you say that, because I started my professional life late in my 30s, and I worked in mental health, and I worked on forensic units around Oxford. So I was meeting some of the types of people you're talking about, doing some of the heinous things that, and again, it was really strange to me because we're talking about human beings and connecting with them as human beings. They may have done these things acting out of illness. And interestingly, we don't think of trauma as illness, but again,
that's right. You're absolutely spot on. Yeah.
And yet that can be just as much a precursor to people's actions as people who are kind of clinically unwell in that way. So I learned very early on in my career that just treat people as human beings as best I can, because they are not, and they've done some awful things, and some of them still weren't very nice people, if I'm honest. Some of them were very scary, but again, depending on where they were in their treatment regime. Yeah.
Adam, are you sort of resonating with this? Not like, are you one? That's a really unfortunate way of saying it. What's your position on this? Where do you place yourself?
I don't pretend to know more than I do, like the ins and outs about the mental health side of things. I just know that when Conroy was speaking earlier about where these like initial messages like sort of come from, and being told that I was bad when I was younger and stuff, for simple things as a young boy, I'd like just like physical like play with my friends. Like it's straight away you're told that you're not allowed to be violent or push, or you're not allowed to break any sort of challenge or see how strong you are. And I think that plays a massive part in young men not knowing how to communicate around other young men, which then lead to violence and lead to darker situations because they haven't been trained from a younger age to deal with that sort of
Those aggressive
communication.
impulses, right?
Yeah.
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 I mean, I remember growing up, there were loads of boxing clubs, and then there was a fad for closing them down because it was the idea was the boxing clubs created the problem. I thought they solved the problem, to be honest.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and again, just off the back of what you're saying there, Adam, around teaching young men, we've come across this idea of self-regulation and how to promote self-regulation, regulating of difficult emotions. And actually, I'm hearing now in certain educational places that is what's going on, starting to train young people of how to work with the difficult emotions as they arise and how to kind of deal with anger, how to deal with jealousy, how to deal with envy, how to deal with the difficult stuff, which is what you're saying there, Adam. We had no clue I didn't have no clue what to do with difficult stuff, but I could see that there was one way around it, and that's to slap somebody or shout at somebody, and that seemed to create a reaction and work. It alleviated something, and and also kept me safe in the environment I grew up in. And it's awful to say that because oh dear.
You're okay there, Conroy?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking of the idea of kind of hurting others to keep myself safe was a kind of a narrative, a story.
Well, I'm gonna share this. I don't really often talk about this very much, but when I grew up in Birmingham as a kid, I used to carry a knife with me, and it happened after somebody had attacked me with a knife and had humiliated me in front of their gang and made me beg for my life and stuff like that. I don't have particularly strong, unpleasant memories about it. I've done all this personal work, and so I don't have any of these flashback things anymore. But I then carried a knife with me because I was frightened and I was angry as well. And I wanted revenge. And I carried this thing around with me for ages. And then what changed for me was I remember distinctly, I was bunking off school again. Sort of like, I don't know how I got away with it, to be honest. I was just lucky that I was good at exams. That's all that happened. So I aced the exams because I was really good at cramming and I really enjoyed exams. There's something weird about me, but there you go. Anyway, I was bunking off school one day. I should sort of, that's not illegal, so I can say it. And I was walking around. I was walking to my sister's flat, my eldest sister's flat, and I had the knife in my pocket and I got it out and I imagined pushing it into somebody. And I was disgusted. I was revolted because I really thought about it up until that point. Do you know what I mean? I thought like I had this object which somehow gave me some sense of security, but then I actually thought about using it and it horrified me. And it was really weird. I didn't know I had those feelings because I'd been brought up being told I didn't have feelings like that.
Right.
That was the truth. I mean, literally, the whole of society was telling me that I had no empathy and I had no feelings and I wouldn't feel bad about hurting somebody. It was all right. It was just part of who I was. And that's the background I come from. It was poverty. It was poor. It was Irish. There was racism. There was war. There was like this and that and that. But actually, it horrified me. This little boy. And I was like, no, I can't imagine. That's horrible doing that. And I think there's a lot of.
And what were your next steps after that, Noel? After you realized there's this, you had this.
My next steps were I threw away that knife. Well, I should have disposed of it safely. I'm sorry, but I threw it away in disgust. And then because I was in academic, I started to research around men and stuff like that, which is similar to what you do. But literally, I researched around men. I researched around men such as Mandela, who rose above that training and that brutalization and moved to political action and changing the world and helping others and Gandhi and various people. And I was lucky that I went that route instead. And I started doing that. So I started to create my own mentors, as it were, I think, looking back.
Right.
And they weren't people I'd ever met. I once met one of my heroes who was Trevor Huddleston, had been a priest, white priest, priest in South Africa. I used to work at a place called the Huddleston Centre in Hackney, which was for disabled kids, named after him. And he actually turned up one day. I remember I was in my 20s, it's outrageous. And everyone was, oh, Trevor Huddlestone's coming. And I went, he's walking up the stairs, and I went, oi, Trevor, hello. Like, bless him. He turned around, he came down the stairs, and he spent 20 minutes talking to me. Now, what a bloke.
Beautiful.
What a bloke.
Mm,
do you know what I mean? It's like this. I mean, he is something else, Trevor Huddlestone. You know, the strength he had to stand up to that regime and his own culture, his own training, and Yeah, he turned around on the stairway for some oik in Hackney and sat down and had a cup of tea with him. And that was it. It was like meeting people like that, Conroy. And to be honest, I don't want to blow smoke up your ass, but I sort of think of you in those terms.
Oh, I don't. It's interesting. I'm hearing you say that, and I'm thinking about the turnaround in my life, and that was again mental health situation. My ex-partner, she became mentally unwell through drug use, and I had to take on my 2 children, and it was then taking on these 2 children, really young, 7 and 4, looking at them and thinking, wow, this life I'm leading is just going to lead us all down the toilet here. I need to do something really different and drastic. I need to stop some of the people I was hanging around with. I was selling drugs. I was kind of in this nowhere place. And a friend of mine says, well, look, you got these 2 children. How about doing some volunteering in this mental health place? And I was like, you must be crazy. I thought, I'll go along and try it out and see. And it just, that was the change. It was hard, because that's the piece, and you can speak about this as well. That turning it round, giving that life up. And I remember one day my son said to me, he said, I knew something had changed, Dad, because we weren't getting nice trainers anymore. But it's like
but there's attractions to the dysfunctional life. There are definitely some rewards, and that's what keeps us going, isn't it? I see you nodding away, Adam. What are the sort of thoughts and feelings and sort of memories that you can share that coming up for you around this stuff?
Oh, just a couple things that you and Conroy both said. Just you talking about the story of the knife. Unfortunately, it wasn't until I got involved with a band of brothers that I actually started thinking about the consequences of my actions and stuff like that. And yeah, it took a while to open up that piece of my turning point, really, about it, if I wanted to make any change, and just absolutely petrified of going to jail. And also, I had a couple of traumatic experience happen to me, and it was I don't know how to say it. I was putting into this world of hate, and I was receiving a lot of it back. And I was speaking to Conroy earlier, and it's nice to be in a place where I'm not in that anymore. And I was quite fortunate to get out without any too many obstacles in my way now, if that makes sense.
How useful is it? And we are being thoughtful and careful about the content of the conversation. We have to be, and that's right. And people are looking after themselves. How useful is it, though, do you think, Adam, and then maybe Conroy can answer this, that to be a mentor in Band of Brothers, that to some extent you've had some types of similar experiences, or some experiences that you can share and offer what I might think of as identification to people?
No, for me, I mean, my mentor was an ex-police officer. We had absolutely nothing in common whatsoever. But what worked was the fact that he was authentic with that. He didn't try and be my mate. Being a mentor isn't trying to be my mate or trying to relate to me. It's literally giving your time to walk along my path with me for a bit, without trying to fix any of my problems or anything like that. And then we formed an unbreakable relationship. I'm still in contact with him to this day. 7 years later, he invited me to his wedding.
Wow.
He'll always be a part.
That's quite an interesting turnaround.
Yeah.
Invited to this couple's wedding. Was that ever on the cards?
Not in my head, it weren't.
For all
But
sorts of
I respected the man. He didn't try and be my friend or try and, yeah, I know what you're going through. I've been there too. It was none of that sort of
right.
bollocks. He was just authentic with himself, and he challenged me, like, and he helped me see that a lot of my issues and a lot of my problems were my issues and my problems in my head, like, and the stories that I was telling myself, not
Okay,
what
cool.
stories other people are talking about.
And is this part of the training that you give to mentors, Conroy?
Again, it's fantastic hearing you say that stuff, Adam, because again, the men that step forward from their communities, and big shout out to you guys, any of you listening, any of you not listening, because you're an amazing bunch of people. They are just everyday, ordinary men from all sorts of backgrounds who step forward and say, I want to do something in my community. I want to make a change. And of course, as an older man stepping in there, thinking that they do know something and that they know better than the young men, there is a whole heap of training. There's an undoing that story that you're there to help, you're there to do something, to change something. So again, they go through the rites of passage and they go through our training, which I believe is world class, our mentor training, to actually get them to look at what's going on inside and actually how to be a soul friend, a person that's going to be there and hear it. And when a young man turns up and he's missed an appointment, or he's kind of been to prison again or something, it's like, okay, so that's what's happened, right? Now what do you want to do? It's not like any of that stuff. It's not like I know any better than you, because hopefully you can attest to that, Adam. We really don't come across as that we know better about your life. It's you are the expert, and what do you need? And I'm a peer of ears. I'm someone that's kind of, yeah, I've trodden certain paths, but it doesn't make me any wiser or greater. I believe in the system, and the system seems to work. That's what our system I'm talking about.
Yeah,
is that right?
I definitely agree with what Conroy said about our mentoring training. I don't know the big wide world around the other trainings or whatever, but I know the work that we do, and yeah, it works. I now support with the training in the Brighton community, and I'm training myself up to deliver as many of the training
So
as many of the trainings as we've got.
Either of you, would you be able to sort of begin to sketch out these rites of passage weekends and this training and the types of things that you ask people rather than the content itself?
Yeah, I can do that in a kind of broad stroke. So the rites of passage weekend, it's going away from your familiar, what you know, the people around you, taking you somewhere completely different, somewhere out in the wild. Hopefully it's wet, windy and rainy, so that the experience is kind of really quite shocking to the system. Okay. And then it's like let's look at what you bring here. And it's not a Bear Grylls weekend. It's not about beating chests and lighting fires and swinging from tree to tree. It's about what is the narrative you tell yourself. And through the weekend, we have a story that runs, and people connect themselves to this story. If you know the work of Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, then you'll understand this idea of rites of passage. It's a dip down and then kind of a lift up, break down that sense of what I'm holding on to, that sense of my ego, and then giving space for people to reform in a way that works for them and who they are. That's the rites of passage piece. That's as much as I can. I'm happy to go with it.
Okay. It's definitely not like a lone wolf SAS training. It's like a communal group thing, right?
You'll meet there's a whole bunch of men from your community, up to 30 men kind of there, and the young men find themselves surrounded by a bigger force than they are. So it's like, as much as they think, as much as the damage they think they can bring, suddenly they realize, wow, these people have got this. And actually, let me put it back for me on my rite of passage. It was the first time in my life, really, that I looked into the eyes of men, that I could see that they'd done the work, and I could also see that they could hold me. And the other thing that was most important, the way they spoke to me, the way what they elicited from me, I realized for the first time that my bullshit's not going to work here. I'm not going to be able to hide.
Yeah.
You know,
that's always a useful thing to find out, I think.
It got me through life.
I'm an Irishman. I'm genetically programmed for bullshit. Sort of, I don't need to kiss the blow on his stone to be fair. So, but I mean, it's an interesting thing. I sort of, there's a number of things that are coming up for me, ways I'm relating to it on a very personal level. One is that when I got sober, I went on a weekend similar to that, and it was very much about a group of guys getting together and thinking about what it was to be a man. And hang on, I got someone. Oh, I got a message. I'll get back to you. Message. Thanks for sending the message about the show. I'll get back to it in a minute. And it was mostly because I'd stopped using. I'd got clean and sober and all that sort of stuff. And it sort of struck me that I'd missed out on a lot of life. As I'd been doing this stuff. And I was a bit confused and a bit lost as to exactly who I was. And it was a bit embarrassing as well, because I was in my 40s. And there's a lot of stuff people seem to know and just have on tap about who they were and what they were in life that I just didn't get. Do you know what I mean? And I needed a place, I needed some way of trying to orientate myself in what felt like a very strange and not hostile, but just strange world that I wasn't grasping, right? And I've done a lot of personal work and therapy and stuff like that. I have to say, this particular long weekend I did, which was halfway up a Welsh mountain and was atrocious weather.
Perfect.
Because Wales is atrocious weather. Sorry, Wales, but it is, right?
Perfect.
And it was I don't want to say transformative, because I don't really believe in transformations in that sense. I mean, I think there are points when things can happen that can be navigational points, really profound navigational points. That's my experience, right? But that there was something about being with other men, just as confused as I was, that was really helpful, to be honest. It's like, I was like, I'm not the only one who doesn't know how to do this shit called life.
Well, it's a great point you're talking to there, Noel. I didn't know how I had a formula to be with men. You know, there's things that we talk. I used to call them the 3S: football, fucking, and fighting.
Yeah, right.
That was the formula, and I could work because I knew those, and I knew that world, and it worked. And suddenly on this weekend, none of that was there. None of that was available. All my armor was taken away. There was none of those. We kind of take away the banter stuff and keep it and be authentic and kind of really touch into what is your authentic self. And that was bloody scary, mate. I tell you, it was great seeing other men do it, but the idea that I could be as authentic as that and turn up like that, wow.
I'm going to share the thing around, because there was a lot of stuff on that weekend, and I think one of the things, my experience about being with other men and doing work, is that it's totally permissible to think, oh, that's pile of shit, I'm so interested. So they asked me to do this rebirthing thing, and I just thought, oh fuck, I can't stand this shit. I thought that when they described it to me, I did it, I thought it was shit, I finished it, I still thought it was shit, but that was all right. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's got to be all right. But there was a thing they did, and to this day, I can't tell you how deeply it touched me. And I feel very emotional thinking about it. And it's a very simple thing. And I don't know if it's back to my Catholic roots or something like that, but we went in for a meal in this long room. And what happened was the facilitators of the weekend had this ritual where they washed our feet. And I can feel myself choking up. And you went in one by one. And all the men who'd facilitated, the father figures, were there to sort of take your shoes and socks off and wash your feet gently, and then gently dry them. And there was something profoundly humble and loving, and I can't even describe to you what it was like. And then I went in and sat in that long room, just sort of really in some sort of daze, and I don't really remember much of the meal and stuff like that, but I don't think I'd ever really experienced that from other guys. Ever. Something like that. But just, and it was non-erotic. It didn't bring up any sort of thoughts other than, and that idea of a bloke humbly serving me and wanting to have a nice, it just never occurred to me that that could possibly happen between men.
Do you mind me asking what the average age of the participant men were?
It varied, but I would say I was in the upper range. I was in my 40s, mid 40s, and I was in the upper range. So there was some younger, I think a lot were 20, 30s, and then there was me, and then some of the facilitators, which were more in their 50s. So I
don't even say that because you imagine us trying to do that, Adam. I remember you'd probably kicked me in the head.
Yeah, I was just thinking like, yeah, like it doesn't, like, yeah, it's just, yeah. If that's what worked for you, if that's what was profound for you, then blessings on your journey, dude. But I don't really like feet. And if that becomes part of what I've got to do on a weekend, then Conroy, I'm out.
Oh, cool. And that's absolutely beautiful encapsulation of it. I think that there is within this work, there's lots of different ways of doing it, and there's lots of different experiences. But I think a lot of it is about just getting genuine about and authentic and honest about what is working.
Exactly. And just
I can speak for myself, like, and I don't think that, like, until I sort of like did the weekend as a young man, I didn't tap in or acknowledge any of my fear or any of my grief. It was all masked by anger. And what I got on this weekend was a chance to look underneath what was underneath my anger. Like, yeah.
And was it like you said it was a trauma and loss of stuff that was there for you?
Yeah, but also just the part of me that was like before the anger came out, there was fear. I mean, I was by myself in the big bad world, and I had to, as Conroy says, have armor and stuff like that, and having a loud bark or like biting first can be a very strong armor, and it did keep me safe.
And what sort of age are coming into your events, Conroy, these transition weekends?
The young men will be 18 to 25.
Okay.
Basically, we don't really. It's interesting actually, because if you look at the real sense of what rites of passage actually is, technically we ought to be working with 12 to 14-year-old boys.
Yeah.
But again, in this world, with DBSs and safeguarding and all of that stuff, we could not possibly work with boys of that age. But again, that is that real age, and it's a pity because you have to say, Adam, one of the things about you when you came through it, you was ready for change. You was ready for a shift. You knew it with yourself.
I was, and I was on the latter end of the age group, and like it definitely wouldn't have worked for someone like me when I was 18, 19. But I mean, speaking to that whole age thing that you just said, I mean, I think it's nuts, and like it bewilders me how they've decided that in this country, you're 18 and you're now a man. That's the age. But the only other people that can decide whether or not you're not, if you are like the police can adult you if you're 12 to 14. They can treat you like an adult male if they so choose to. But no one else in the world is allowed to do that. We're not allowed to go, you know what, mate, you might only be 15, 16, but mentally right about now you're ready to be a man. But the police can do it if it works in their favor. It boggles my brain why it's like that for some.
It's interesting because Ab and I were talking before the show started, and the culture the show had started. The culture you come from, Adam, does recognise the sort of age that you're talking about, Conroy, that there are rites of passage within Jewish culture at that age for young men.
Exactly, because that's where it's placed. Because that's the point where you're ready to start to step into a different sense of responsibility for yourself and for the community around you. And again, by the time a lot of these, just as Adam's saying, by the time a lot of these guys got to 18, they are so hardened. they're so well into it that they're not ready. They're in the middle of their career. They're not ready to actually really look at that stuff. And again, the big piece is they also know they're going back. They're going back to that estate. They're going back to those people.
Yeah, right.
So to take off that armor in that way, so I loosen a little bit up, but to go back and to be unarmored is really dangerous.
Yes, yes. I just want to bring in this message. It's from Zach Waring. I don't know if either of you know him in the Brighton community.
Yeah,
he's sent a message through saying the ABOB community, which is the Band of Brothers, I reckon, has helped me through a lot on my journey so far. I love each and every one of these men with all my heart. Can't recommend this to young men enough, my brothers and two hearts.
Go on, Zach.
Which is interesting, isn't it? That, you know, and bringing up this notion of love, which is my clumsy attempt with feet, and this idea of where is that place in context of young men who are armored and have to present violence and anger, and because when I was working with street kids on the streets, the gang leaders would tell me very clearly that the way they recruited was to offer them love. It wasn't offering lots of other things. It's because these young kids that they were finding had been abandoned by society, their parents, and they were desperate for attachment. I may call it attachment if it's easier word. And they were just looking for somebody to attach to, and these gang leaders were clear about that. Principally, that's what they would offer: safe, secure attachment. It was brutal, it was difficult, but it was consistent, and they spun a yarn to these kids that they cared about them, and that they were joining the gang was somehow like joining a band of brothers. Yes,
you're right. It is exactly. I mean, Adam will can talk more clearly about, because you're younger than me, Adam, and the world from when I was young was very different in terms of recruitment into gangs and that type. And it's that's another interesting aspect, because you talk to a lot of the young men I talk to, and they don't feel they're in any gang. This isn't the gang. It's like fam. It's like
family. That's right.
If people care, they actually, and they may feel tough and they may look tough, but we're not like the Crips and the Bloods. It's not none of that business going on. This is business, and these are my business associates.
That's literally what you're dealing with, is those types of dynamics.
Yeah, and again, where you talk about love, we don't openly go there in that way to say, I love you, young man, little fellow, whatever it is. What it is, from my central point, I serve through love. It's from that love place I can hold myself, and kind of if we have hate on one side and love on, it's the love side of my continuum that I stand in the fire alongside the young men, and whatever they feel and whatever they get, it is from that space, like a loving parental kind of guide, if you like. So it is important, it is real, but we don't. It would frighten men off if we started to.
No, I hear it. I mean,
yeah, but can I just say something? Yeah. No mentor in a band of brothers has ever said that they love me, or that they care about me, or that if I'm with them, it's going to be safe. They haven't. Those words have never come out of their mouths. Their actions have shown that they care about me.
Thank you.
But they actually haven't. They don't need to use any words or anything like that. And they've never once lied to me and told me that it's going to be easy or safe. I'm going through a lot of. I've been going through stuff. Drug addiction, getting away from a life of crime, trying to legitimize myself. That's not going to be safe. That's going to be easy. And they didn't bullshit me and tell me that it was. And that whole love from the gangs and even relationships and whatever it is, it's conditional love. There's conditions to it. And there's something like nothing was asked from me at all, and nothing was offered. I was just told that it's there. There was no like, we love you, or this is the safe, this is the right way, or anything like that. It was just try this or not. Like, and yeah, it had to sort of have maybe a leap of faith.
But somehow you knew they cared, even though they didn't say it. And sort of how did you know that they did care? Was it just because they kept turning up, or?
it was through other things that were said, and like the way just through communicating with them and speaking with certain men, and yeah, I mean, just certain actions and being invited to my mentor's wedding and stuff like that. I mean, that showed that he cared, or he respected me enough to have him in a part of his life, and stuff like that. Being asked to step up in the organisation, that was a show, like, yeah, show that they cared about me and that they wanted me to be around, and like, yeah, but there was no, we really love you, or like,
And
yeah.
what would have happened to you, do you think, if early on people had come out with that type of words?
If it was all, look, I live in Brighton as it is. If it was all like hippy dippy fairy like blah, then I would just, yeah, I would have signed what I needed to sign, done what I needed to do, and then said thank you very much, my probation officer, and never looked back.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there's another thing that again you can attest to, Adam, if you so choose. And there is a certain code we honor, and that's being impeccable with our speech, kind of not taking things personally, and things like this. And we invite the young men, the people around us, to call us out when they see us not acting impeccable, when they see us taking things personally. So any young man, CEO or not of this organization, any young man can say, actually, I've got a charge with how you're carrying on. I've got an issue with you, and I'll stand there and hear that, and I answer to that, and I'll take accountability. We take accountability, and the young men can offer us that kind of step of taking accountability for actions. If I'm not, if I let someone down, if I'm late, or if I'm, for a meeting, anyone can call me out, and that's also something that kind of engenders that.
It's sort of leveling of the power dynamic, rather than we got power, you have to learn from us, we're dragging you up. It was like, hang on a minute, this is more of an equal relationship.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was allowed to and wasn't allowed to say about like what we do, but yeah, the way they showed that they cared and all that, like, yeah, it's the 4 agreements that they live by, and that they aspire and challenge, that we aspire and challenge ourselves to live by, which is Conroy has just said what they were. So
yeah,
say them again. Can you say them again?
To take nothing personally, to do my honourable best, make no assumptions, and my word is my bond.
We borrow those from the Toltec tradition, a kind of South American First Nation people who that was the code they lived by. We borrowed that as a way of holding us to something that's bigger than ourselves, that's outside of ourselves. And and that, I tell you, that one line, taking nothing personally, just aspiring to that, has changed my life, mate. Honestly, the things people could say at me, and it's like those trigger points. It's like, no, actually, I don't take this personally. I can see why you're angry. I can see what's going on for you. I can see there's a person in pain over there, and doesn't mean I don't take things personally from time to time, but aspiring to that has really helped me change a lot of things around how I interact with other people.
It's an interesting one. I wonder what both of you think about this, because my experience is that it's very difficult to depersonalize when you're highly traumatized and highly full of shame. It's like everything feels raw.
I'm not very good at it. It's just an aspiration.
That's a great answer, Adam. That's a great answer. But that's right. That's right. And it's also, I mean, it is that thing. And I think there's something quite sad that goes on for a lot of guys around how traumatized men are and how it's not, to be honest. It makes me feel quite sad. I mean, go on.
Yeah, although I'm not very good at not taking things personally, what is good now though is I know when I am taking things, but it might be in hindsight.
Okay.
But having that hindsight a lot quicker than sort of waiting 8 years and finding myself in a lot of trouble, then going, oh no, wait, you've been taking everything so personally. Being to individually go, oh no, wait, I was taking that shit personally then, and recognizing that in myself, it's a step, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
And then you can go back, you have a chance to go back and take responsibility for the situation in which.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the big piece there, what you're saying, taking responsibility for my actions in the world and the consequences of my actions. Not being defined by those actions, but taking responsibility. Owning.
From trying to understand it, like because I'm trying to relate it to my life, if you like. And sort of one of the things that struck me about what you were talking about, Adam, about people, you didn't use these words, I don't think Conroy did, but people were, I think you did actually, they were walking alongside with you on the journey rather than guiding, they were beside you. And the image that came to my head was some of the best times I have with my boys when we're doing absolutely nothing, we're just with each other.
Yeah.
And it's just great. I can't describe how nice that is. And it's the first time it happened, it was like 4.5. I had only known him for about 6 months. And we were on a beach. It was all busy. And we went for a walk and he sat down and he went, "Oh, it's quiet." And I went, "Yeah, it is." And we both just sat there quietly for like 20 minutes together. Nothing. It's absolute magic. And something happened. I don't know what it was, but something happened. We really appreciate that and sort of the ability to share a comfortable space. And I don't know why that came up for me, but I guess there's a lot of action, a lot of activity in relationship with the mentor, but something about the emotional space being this quiet and available is what struck me, right?
Yeah. You're going to come in there and no. It's right, actually. Yeah, there is activity, there is stuff, but actually we also spend time just being. Just being sat with each other, and we sit in circle, that kind of ancient piece again, men sitting in circle, people sitting in circle. Again, that levels out the power difference. It's not ahead of the table. We can all see each other. We meet up weekly and sit in circle and listen to each other. We're there for each other. And knowing that these men have got my back and I've got their back, it's very powerful.
It's also quite, I mean, because people, I don't know, people are really understanding the clientele and the context that they're coming from, because you are dealing, Conroy, with people who live in very dangerous circumstances, for whom sitting in a relaxed manner with other guys is quite a revolution, right? Like, seriously.
Yeah, and we don't with that's I'm glad you said that, because that's one thing we try not to go into, that type of terminology. You're not my you guys are not my clients. They're not they're not the this object as a client. There's a human person. Yeah. Adam and I were talking before this earlier on today, and I was like talking about my dilemma, because once a person's come through the 3 months of mentoring, they're invited into the community. They become part of the community. Okay. And that's the piece. Now you've got a community, you've got something to lose. And so the idea of who are you in the community? So we have this term graduate, and actually it leaves me more and more really uncomfortable, because there's still a separation. There's still you're the graduates, we're the kind of men, and there's something about that. I'm was dropping all of that and being as equals. Adam rings me up any time he's got an issue with me or someone else and just talks to me person to person. It ain't that he's a graduate. He's he's an initiated man of a band of brothers, and that's the piece. Getting rid of these ideas that they're separate bits. It's okay. It's useful during the time when a person's coming through the initiation, that 3 months, but after that, the leveling up piece is what gives people the confidence that they can actually step forward in their life and be equals with people, being treated as equals and not lesser than. That's what's important for me.
Right. We've actually come to the end of the hour.
Have we?
I know, it's always happens, doesn't it? It's like, it feels like 2 or 3 minutes, right? But we've actually come to like the end of the show, and we've.
It's not possible.
I know, it's ridiculous that we've literally been talking for an hour. We do have to finish, because it's an hour-long show, and that's the boundary on it. I'd love to continue. It's, you know, it's an amazing. And I know you're not going to like the terminology. You're not going to like me putting you on the pedestal, but tough shit. you are an amazing organization. You're an amazing person, Conroy. And the work is extraordinary in the field. And very much I admire what's happening, what you're doing. It's very authentic, it's real. And as far as I can tell, it's always growing and learning. It's always changing and shifting and giving a real hope in these times, particularly now, because I think that, you know, what we know, what you know, what we know from evidence is that during economic downturns, men get it in the neck a lot.
Yeah.
And this is when men start killing themselves.
Yeah.
That's what happens during these times. Adam?
Can I just say one last thing though, because you've done it a couple of times. You've kept calling it an organisation, and it's not. It's a community. It's an organised community of men.
Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, the last word from me is Cameron. A young man died. One of our community died last week.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just wanting to remember his name here, because every one of us are important. Yeah.
I mean, what I feel has happened in this very quick hour is that people have had an insight into how the community operates.
Yeah.
The equality, the democracy, the conversation, the authenticity, the sharing of our ideas, the calling each other out, and in a respectful manner, and the, you know, the commitment and passion, you know, and the courage.
Yeah.
All of those things have been present for me in this hour.
Thank you.
And so I feel very honoured to have shared that. And I want to thank you both. I'm going to have the last word, and I'm going to leave it having said nice things to you, and you're not allowed to comment. Just going to have to tolerate those feelings, whatever ones you're having. So stay there with me, guys. I'm going to say goodbye to the audience, and I'll see you all next week. Fabulous evening for me, really sort of heartwarming and touching my soul this evening. Going to say goodbye for now, and I'll see everybody next week. You two just stay there.